Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Litecoin Underground podcast. So sometimes if you listen to my Twitter spaces, and you'll probably hear them even as I open up the show a lot of times on these, I kind of have some theories or topics I want to cover. And those come from just, the fact that for whatever reason I can't stop thinking about cryptocurrencies. I find them interesting. I feel like there's arguments against them, and maybe you have these imaginary conversations to defend them or to try to teach people about them. So one that's come up a lot, though, or that I've been thinking about a lot, has been this privacy and fungibility conversation. So if you don't know, last year, about 13, 14 months ago, MWeb was added to Litecoin. MWeb stands for Mimble Wimble Extension Blocks. So I've done a video on it. I would say go find some interviews with David Burkett if you want some really technical analysis of what it is. But essentially what the goal of it is to add kind of a layer of privacy / fungibility to Litecoin. So let's back up before MWeb was around. And as I've said before, Bitcoin and Litecoin are very similar. So before MWeb, essentially everything on Litecoin is transparent. What that means is you can go online and look up a Litecoin block explorer. You can view your addresses. So if you open up a wallet and you have a public address with what's called a UTXO is kind of I'll call it like a serial number for a particular amount of coins. So it's not like one UTXO is used like a dollar bill. It's just kind of however much is inside that particular serial number. It can vary, but you can actually track the history of it. You can see where did coins come from. So if I have serial number 123, you can look back and see that the coins I received at 123 were received from 122. And 121 and 120, right on down the line, all the way back to kind of when the coins originated. Now, it's a crazy map. When you start divvying up these coins and they're being sent around a lot, you're talking about a lot of transactions, a lot of different wallets with really no way to provably show that any of these coins are linked to an individual person. And this is what's gotten me thinking a lot about, like, what's the difference between privacy and fungibility, and what's the goal with these things? And I guess this is a theory I have, or kind of a concept I've been kind of rolling around in my brain. So one of the things I think is important to focus on is what is the purpose of fungibility? Because if you hear people like, the Monero crowd is pretty notorious for this, right? So Monero is absolutely private at the base layer. What that means is you can't go on a Monero block explorer and track Monero coins. You can't even, if you see someone has a wallet, there's no way of proving where coins were sent to who and tying a name specifically to a certain set of coins. Certainly that didn't come off of an exchange, right? You just find somebody randomly, you look at their wallet, you're not going to be able to see what history they have of their usage of Monero. Where with Litecoin, you could actually see, well, they sent money to this address, and they sent money to this address, and sent money to this address. They received money from a certain address. And there are companies out there like Chain Analysis, I think it's called, or Chain Analysis, one of the two, and others. I think Elliptical's another one, and they can map out this kind of web of transactions and link transactions to each other. So for instance, let's say I buy some coins on Coinbase, I withdraw them to my wallet. So when I went on Coinbase, I have to give them my name and number. They call it KYC, know your customer. Generally, you have to take a picture of yourself, a picture of your driver's license, probably link a bank to it. Sometimes you have to prove where your money came from so that they can make sure you're not money laundering. So it's KYC, which is know your customer, and AML is anti-money laundering. So all these banks and all these major institutions that are regulated and licensed have to report this information to the IRS, and probably other groups as well, right? You can assume the DEA and the ATF and Homeland Security and all these other people have that information, and they know, okay, this UTXO, or this serial number, we'll call it, belongs to me, Litecoin Underground. Okay, they know I bought it and I withdrew it and sent it to such and such an address. Again, this UTXO. They could say it's very likely that that money belongs to Litecoin Underground. This is where the question comes in of what's the purpose of fungibility? Now, if you don't know what fungibility is by definition, it's that all units are interchangeable. And I think that's actually an important distinction, because I'll say that Monero folks are right in that since none of the Monero coins have a history attached to them, they're very fungible in a technical sense, that they are interchangeable. There's no history. There's no tainting of a coin. There's no way to differentiate one coin from the other because there is no history. So they all function identically. With Litecoin, there is a history to coins, okay? Again, I'm talking pre-Mimblewimble, and we can get into Mimblewimble here in a second, but I just want to talk about main chain, the main stuff. So this got me thinking about, like, well, what is the purpose of fungibility? You know, they will tell you it's important for sound money to be fungible. And the question is why? You know, certainly with cryptocurrencies, you have what we'll call it's an anti-state money, right? A lot of us who are old school cryptocurrency people will tell you, you know, this technology is not necessarily intended for mass adoption. It may be mass adopted, but it's really intended to be kind of this anti-government edict, anti-fiat, meaning I can operate outside the rules of fiat money. So the big concern with fungibility is that you will be linked. So if Litecoin is not fungible, that I can be linked to bad behavior even if I'm not guilty. At least this is what my perception is. The purpose of fungibility is that you don't want to be censored by the person you're trying to send money to. You want to feel confident that when I have Litecoin and I go to spend it or use it, the other person is going to take it because they perceive it as having value. If we find that this trackability of money, right, the trackability on Litecoin and Bitcoin leads to governments, assuming your guilt because of your association with a particular UTXO or serial number, and I guess seeing that as rightful grounds to investigate you or to snoop on your activities or to, issue a warrant for your arrest or to freeze your accounts, that type of thing, that's when fungibility matters. Be outside of that, I don't quite know what the purpose of the fungibility is, okay? Because in the protocol, Litecoin and Bitcoin are fungible, meaning like there's no ability for a recipient to reject your transactions or filter your transactions based on its history. So if I have somebody who's a Litecoiner, no matter what the history of my coins are, their wallet views those UTXOs as the same as every other. So within the protocol, there's no distinction of coin history. There's no good and bad coins, quote unquote. And so when we're talking about fungibility in this sense, what has gotten me thinking is that we're really talking about a human behavior. We're talking about the ability for the recipient to question or analyze the coins that they're sending you. Because the computer program itself, the Litecoin protocol, isn't going to do that censoring for you. So it really comes down to human behavior and a human's choice to reject a transaction. So I have a list next to me on my whiteboard, if you've seen my videos, and there's 7 qualities of crypto, or Bitcoin and Litecoin I always take. Decentralized, permissionless, trustless, censorship-resistant, immutable, secure, and scarce. And even Satoshi used the phrase censorship-resistant. And I think the reason he did that is he understood that the only way to, the only censorship that's possible on Bitcoin and Litecoin is from the recipient, right? So I go to spend money. I can't force somebody to take my Litecoin. They have to willingly take it. They may want to convert it into something else, right? Which in a sense, they're then accepting Litecoin. Even if they switch it into dollars, they switch into Bitcoin, or they switch into Ethereum or whatever. At that moment, I'm not being censored. I'm able to spend my money at an agreed upon price, and there's nothing that's preventing me from using the coins. So the fungibility comes in when there's the potential for censorship. And so this is where I started thinking about, well, why would people censor this money? Why would you censor money based on its history? Okay? I gave you the government example, right? The government might say there was a transaction from Iran or North Korea that was involved with weapons, and, you're the UTXO, you were the recipient of that money, right? The money got sent from what we believe to be a terrorist organization, and it went into your wallet. So when I take my coins and try to send them to Coinbase, right? Now, Coinbase is this trusted institution that has to be licensed by the government. They may have flagged certain UTXOs, and Coinbase can say, they may even take the money, but then freeze your account, because now you are subject to an investigation. Even if you have no idea why, you might have bought a gift card or something, and you were 2 steps away from a terrorist transaction or a suspected terrorist transaction. And now, just because you were innocently using your money, you're a suspect, quote unquote. Obviously, this is not an ideal scenario, right? I think we could say these are one of the things that is a definite weakness of Bitcoin and Litecoin in their native state. So that's one way you can be censored. The other would be that the person who you're trying to spend money with, so I go to a store and I say, hey, do you guys accept Litecoin? And they might go, nope, I'm not interested, right? That's another way. And why would they not be interested? Why would this fungibility cause a problem with them being interested? The problem could be they receive the Litecoin, they go to convert it into another currency on an exchange they like, and now suddenly they're tied to this quote-unquote dirty coin, right? Now they're 3 steps away from this terrorist transaction, and do their funds get frozen, and does it become a problem for them? So the big issue is, will governments use this trackability as a kind of weapon against cryptocurrency? That's really the big question. We've seen it a little bit. If you remember, about 2 years ago, there was some protests in Canada with the truckers that were blocking the roadway, and they were receiving donations from people via Bitcoin to like a Coinbase account, meaning like an exchange account. I don't know if it was Coinbase specifically. Because the Canadian government saw this as kind of like a terrorist group, anybody in the U.S. who sent money to those truckers from a Coinbase account could be kind of linked, and they'd be like, well, hey, this guy's supporting terrorism in another country. And all of a sudden it became a big issue that you're supporting something that a government doesn't like. And it's in black and white, right? They can track the transaction. Obviously, that's a problem. That's a problem that, to me, is not solved by necessarily hiding. It's more about blending in. So this is obviously a problem, right? You don't want to feel like you're going to spend your money or you're going to receive some money and then not be able to use it. That would probably be the worst possible form of money you could get, is unusable money. Now, it may be unusable to be turned into Coinbase. If you try to send it to a licensed exchange and convert it into something else. But you wouldn't be censored if you took those coins. If the guys that were the truckers received just on-chain Bitcoin from somebody anonymously into a private wallet, there'd be no way to stop that transaction, or to even have the government know that it was happening, right? Or to tie that wallet to a specific individual. It's really when you get into these exchanges and these kind of what we'll call white market or white market adoption, meaning merchants who are using something like BitPay or, exchanges, companies that use like, was it Square or Cash App or PayPal or Venmo, any of those types of interfaces are going to be the ones where you're going to cause problems. So what got me thinking about all this stuff is I think it's important that we have this distinction of why is the fungibility important? And it really comes down to that whole idea of I need to know that I can spend my money confidently and that merchants will feel confident and comfortable that they can accept this money and won't run into any problems. And that's the big elephant in the room, so to speak. And I think what has gotten lost in this conversation, what happens so often with cryptocurrencies when we kind of battle back and forth and we have all these technical variants, is that the actual goal is lost in the conversation. Because I think Monero, if you were to say, like, is Monero more fungible than Litecoin and Bitcoin? Absolutely. There's nothing on chain that identifies a coin. There's no way to differentiate one Monero or fraction of a Monero from another one because there is no history. But what I believe is more important is that the Litecoin becomes so used, so generally accepted, that purely owning Litecoin or having a particular UTXO doesn't lay any particular blame at your feet. Meaning, just having cash, right? If I get pulled over and I've got some cash, that doesn't mean I did anything wrong. It just means I have cash, right? If I go to a store and spend cash, that store doesn't have any concern that somebody will see that as valuable or that they'll be able to use it because they know that there's plausible deniability. They had no reason to believe this was counterfeit money or tainted money in some way. Counterfeit's probably a bad example, but they have there's no expectation on the part of the government that that the merchant receiving that cash would be responsible for the history of that cash or have any reason to question the history of that cash. They're just accepting money. And as long as it goes through and they accept it, there's no reason for them to be concerned, right? And I think that's where the differentiation between Monero and Litecoin comes in, is that you have, with Monero, it's banned on a lot of exchanges. Europe, the EU has been very stern about privacy coins, quote unquote. I think the UAE, United Arab Emirates, Dubai, they outlawed a lot of privacy coins. And so what that means is that by using Monero, kind of by default, there is a reason for the normies, right, the general public, to be a little bit skeptical of it. I'm not saying this is a good thing, by the way. I'm not saying that like Monero shouldn't exist or that Monero is worthless. I think Monero has a very important use case, but I think as far as widespread adoption, it creates an issue. It creates this kind of divide between, I'm going to use the phrase normies because I think that's important. I think people who aren't engaging with cryptocurrencies much, who don't understand deeply the technicals, which is going to be 99% of people, aren't going to really quite understand the difference between these coins. They're going to feel more comfortable accepting something that's deemed legal than something that's deemed illegal. And I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing in the short term. I'm just thinking about what I feel the goal of cryptocurrency ideally would be, that it's so commonly used that purely using Litecoin and Bitcoin wouldn't be seen as criminal in any way, wouldn't be seen as a reason to be suspicious in any way. It would be viewed as using cash or gold or silver, something that is a common investment and people hold it for various reasons, and maybe just a preference, where with something that's been outlawed and been kind of more viewed as, illegal, right, by the government, quote unquote, as a bad coin or whatever, terrorist coin or something, I can see where people would be far less likely to accept it because they just don't know enough and they just don't want to get their hands dirty, right? Like, I don't know the technicals. I've never used Monero, and therefore, like, I would just much rather you give me these other coins. Whether we like that or not, whether that's, the ideal outcome or not, I'm just thinking about what's the reality. So I've kind of thought of this through, like, the important part of fungibility, in my opinion. Fungibility, if I were to break it down to me, is more about blending in than it is about standing out. So Monero as an entire chain stands out as suspicious would be the best way to put it. And not necessarily by me. I'm talking again about how it's going to be viewed and marketed, and basically how the word is going to spread from the government down that, to their officers, hey, if somebody's using Monero, they might be into some shady stuff. That's all that matters, is ultimately this is a human interaction. This isn't a technical interaction. I'm not saying that that's true. I'm just explaining what I think will become kind of the standard. So, does that mean privacy's gone forever? Does that mean we're just going to give into this privacy thing? I don't know. I hope not. But I do think human behavior has shown us that convenience is a lot more important to people than privacy. Privacy is important to a subset of people. And I think for the most part, people want a reasonable degree of privacy. And that's where I think MWeb is a nice balance. I don't think MWeb is there yet fully as like this perfect privacy solution. It may never be, as Monerans would tell you. I guess Monerans. They would tell you that, because there is an ability to track some of the Litecoin, that therefore all the Litecoin is compromised, so to speak. Where I don't necessarily believe that. Inside MWeb, essentially the way MWeb works is there is what's called an extension block. It's a chain that operates kind of on a beside regular Litecoin, but it all, again, is censorship proof within the protocol. There's nobody can stop you from sending MWeb the protocol will not filter out non-MWeb transactions, et cetera, et cetera. So inside MWeb, there are no addresses, there are no transactions amounts. Where there is some trackability is going into MWeb and coming out of MWeb. But if you have some spending cash and you put, let's say, $1,000 worth of Litecoin a month into MWeb and you use it with other MWeb addresses and you keep the money in there, then over time that becomes really difficult to peel apart where MWeb coins were, where non-MWeb coins were. And to me, that's what the important part of fungibility is. It's that it becomes so common for people to be moving in and out of MWeb that it becomes difficult for anybody to reasonably assume that there was any bad activity going on. So if Litecoin has, I think we're looking at, we're doing, for transactions, a couple 100,000 a day. So let's say we're doing 6 million transactions a month. If 4 million of them are in MWeb, in and out of MWeb, and people are using MWeb and they're not using MWeb, and money's going back and forth, it starts to get very difficult to link anything. And that's really the ultimate issue, is you don't want to have some sort of long thread of connection to previous transactions that had nothing to do with you. So I think people will prefer to receive MWeb as opposed to non-MWeb coins, because it would be kind of an initial break in the chain of previous transactions. So I kind of want to close out by just putting it this way. I think in cryptocurrency, we have a lot of very technical conversations. And if you listen to my show, I try as much as I can to really continue to be grounded in the human aspect of money. That as much as we want to have the best technical money in the world, the reality is that humans are using it. Humans are the ones that make the decisions on how they want to interact with this stuff and how they perceive these things. And perception is far more important than reality. As much as we don't want to believe that, we want to believe that, someone, I keep coming back to Monero. I think it's a good example that would it be optimal for everyone to have perfect privacy all the time in their money? To some people, yes. But I think a lot of people would disagree and tell you that I kind of like that there's a level of openness about the protocol. That I can kind of go back and retrace my steps if I had to. And that I can kind of trust, like if there's some fundraising going on, or there's a bit of a check and balance that almost reduces the potential for fraud. And maybe governments do need to be tracked a little more. And wouldn't it be nice if I could see a charity's public, addresses and know where the money's going? I know there's some possibilities of doing that within Monero, and I'm not saying that there's not, but it's just a lot more convoluted process, and it requires a level of trust. You could have a particular view key on Monero, but it doesn't apply to all the wallets that somebody has or all the UTXOs. And so I just think that we have to always remember these are human beings interacting with this stuff. And the more people that use them, the more common it is to use. That's how we achieve fungibility. Because at the end of the day, this is about how people perceive this money. If you use the money, you're going to be a lot less likely to be someone who is suspicious of other users. Because you'll say, well, I've done it. I've sent Litecoin. I wasn't guilty just by association. Where if Monero is outlawed and so few people use it, that your average person who's going to sit on a jury or investigate a case is going to is not going to give fair treatment to Monero users because it is this dark market money. There's going to be an assumption of something nefarious was going on. Again, I got to repeat this 100 times. Not saying that that's the truth. I'm just telling you that's what people will perceive. And perception is, in human environments, which we all engage in, and which money is a human tool, there's going to be this this differentiation in people's minds between a black market money that's been banned and a money that's is considered acceptable, whatever, fair, open, and honest. So I want to remind everybody, I'm not necessarily the truth teller. I'm not a sage. This is just an idea and something I've been thinking about that I hope maybe gets you thinking and can generate some conversation or some thoughts in your own life. And I guess on that note, let's talk about, before I go, I always talk about Cakewallet because they sponsor the show. That's a great tool to be able to move in between Bitcoin and Litecoin and Monero. So if you are a Monero user and you like the privacy 90% of the time, but occasionally you need to go somewhere that doesn't accept Monero, you can go into Cakewallet. You can swap into Litecoin very inexpensively. It doesn't take more than a few minutes, and you're off on your way on Litecoin. So thanks for listening, everybody. I'll try to do some more of these. I kind of like these, just throwing ideas out there, and you guys can tell me I'm an idiot or something like that. All right. Take it easy. Have a good week. Bye.